Last December, I decided to knit the Sailor Slippers pattern by Sews. You've probably seen these slippers, they're all over the internet. And after I finished them, I decided that I wanted to make some improvements on them. So in this video, I'm going to tell you all about the modifications that I made and how it all went. Hi, welcome to Musing Maker. I'm Harriet. I've been a knitter and crocheter for a little over 40 years now, and a few years ago I learned to spin and to weave as well. This channel is where I come to talk about the various challenges and works in progress that I get up to in the field of the fiber arts. My hope is that you will find information and content here that will be useful to you on your own fiber arts journey, and that you'll like and subscribe and come back again and again. Last December, I decided to make the Sailor Slippers pattern by Sews. You've probably seen this pattern, it's extremely popular, and I did an entire video where I talked about the process of making those slippers. I like the finished product that I got working with the pattern itself, but personally, I felt there were a few things that I wanted to improve upon to make the slippers both more wearable and more kind of long-lasting for me. The first thing that I wanted to address was the fact that, for me anyway, as it stood, the slippers were very slippery, right? So they had, because they're just knit from yarn, right? They were basically like kind of a slipper-shaped sock, really, with no grip on the bottom of them. So one of the first things that I wanted to do was to make an outsole for the slippers themselves. The second thing that I wanted to do is because, again, I did not use a bulky weight yarn when I made my particular pair of slippers, so my slippers were quite thin. And so I decided that they also would benefit from having an insole. And then finally, the pattern itself suggests making the slippers in a striped pattern, but I was not really into having striped slippers, and so mine were a solid color, so I began to feel like I liked the way the yarn felted. I thought that looked really nice, but I also thought that, you know, the top of the slippers, the instep area, could benefit from a little bit of decoration. So those were the three things that I kind of wanted to work on. Most of them had to do with practicality and durability, the insoles and the outsoles, but then also kind of making them a more aesthetically appealing slipper for me. So I decided that what I wanted to do for the outsole was to put a suede sole onto the slipper itself. You could also put felt on there. You could actually, if you used a bulky weight yarn and you just need a little more grip, you could actually use like puffy paint basically and kind of make a little pattern on the sole of the slipper, and that would give you a little bit more traction. And so I would say that, you know, that would have been the easiest fix, but I wanted the slippers to kind of last over time, so I decided to acquire some suede and to make a suede outsole. In hindsight, right, that was kind of a big project, and I don't know whether I would, you know, if I had known then what I know now, would I have undertaken it? Probably, because I'm happy with the final result, but it was definitely a bit of a challenge. So what I did was I acquired a pair of suede outsoles that were kind of pre-punched. You can also just get a piece of suede and cut the outsole yourself. I would say if you choose to do that, you want to be extremely careful cutting suede. You generally need to use something like a box cutter to do it, right? You can't just take scissors and cut it out like it's a piece of fabric. So, you know, exercise caution if you decide to cut your own piece of suede for the outsole. The advantage to buying a pair is that the holes come pre-punched around the outside where you're going to sew the outsole onto the slipper itself. That was also extremely helpful. I think that for me, the thing that was most challenging was actually sewing the outsole onto the slipper. And I think that there was no way around that because you kind of had to make the slipper itself before you could put the suede on it because it was suede, right? You couldn't felt the slipper with the suede outsole on it, right? Suede cannot be, cannot get wet, right? It will damage it, it will become brittle. Yeah, you'll ruin the slipper if the soles of the suede sole gets wet. So that turned into a big issue. Stitching it on, I would say probably took about several hours. So I can show you the final result on one of them. Okay, so I basically fitted the outsole onto the sole of the slipper, and then you really want to use waxed thread, right? If you just use plain cotton thread, chances are with the wear and tear, it's gonna wear out. So I bought a little kit that's used for leather work, and it came with all different types of waxed thread, and so that's what's this stitching along the sides. And because obviously the slipper was finished already, you know, stitching around the top of it, it was a process, right? But it worked well. The other thing that I did was I decided that I wanted to create an insole for the slippers, and this was a bit easier than putting the outsoles on. So to create the insole, I just used the slipper sailor pattern and simply knit the sole, right? So from the toe down, and kind of created a sole for the slipper itself. I used a wool yarn that I held double, and then I felted that. And so I will insert footage that shows them, you know, prior to kind of inserting them into the slipper, but I can also show you on the slipper itself, right? And I just basically put it inside the slipper like that and stitched it onto the inside of the foot. And I, you know, kind of made sure as I was going along stitching this that you want to kind of keep trying the slipper on and making sure that it's comfortable. So I ended up putting the insole a little bit away from the heel so that that the seam of it wasn't right under my heel. Basically kind of rule of thumb with socks, with slippers, you know, you have to think about where any bulky portion or things like knots or seams like land may be uncomfortable for your foot. So I wanted to make sure that I kept the seams sort of away from my toes and my heels and places where I would actually be stepping and it might be uncomfortable. So when it's finished, right, it just looks basically like that inside, but now I have an extra layer, right? I have an insole and an outsole. And then the last thing that I did to kind of glow up my sailor slippers was I decided to embroider a little pattern on the top of the foot. So I'll show you that here. And this is actually a very simple embroidery stitch. I can hold it up a little bit closer so you can see it. Right, this is a stitch called a granita, right? And you basically just come up with your thread or yarn through one hole, down through another, and then you just keep doing that, like up and down into the same hole, kind of pushing the threads apart until you get this, yeah, this little raised stitch. And then I just sort of filled it in with a different colored yarn. And so I did that on both slippers. And I did this freehand, I didn't really plot it out. And as it kind of unfolded, what I realized was that I created a way of making the slippers, making it clear, looking at the slippers, which is the left slipper and which is the right slipper. So I'm really happy with how that turned out. I think that yeah, that's, I think the improvement that I liked the most about them. So those were my improvements to the sailor slippers, and I would say I'm very happy with them. The insoles are very comfortable. The outsole, for as much of a problem as it was to work with the suede, and it was a challenge for me. I felt it was a challenge. I think it was worth it because I do have a sole on the slipper now that is going to last for, I think, a bit longer. So that's it for my sailor slippers glow up. If you've made the sailor slippers and you made any modifications to the pattern, please drop a comment down below and let me know what those were. And also and how they worked out for you. And if you found this content interesting or useful, please remember to subscribe. It helps me get this content out to more people and more viewers like you. And I hope to see you here again next week. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great week.